Hi, everyone. This is a panel you do not want to miss. We have our amazing Gen Z folks representing here today. Ellie, Annika, thank you so much for being here. I have one quick question to open us up. When people think about the Gen Z vote, they're thinking brat, they're thinking lime green, they're thinking coconuts in context. But I want to know what the one thing you really want people to know about the power of young people in November is. If they take nothing else away, let it be this. What's the one thing you want them to know about youth vote come November?
I think the one thing that I want people to know about the youth vote is that we are the future. And that when we are thinking about policy, we're thinking about these elections and what we're fighting for the next generation. And that's Gen Z. It starts with us.
Couldn't agree with Ellie more, and I think also when we're talking about the youth vote, we're not just talking about this election cycle. I think young people are going to be the margin of victory this election cycle, but it's also about building power so that young people know that our voices matter and that we can continue to win in 2028, 2032, and beyond.
I couldn't agree more. I think not only are young people going to show their power at the ballot box, but we're already flexing our narrative power on platforms like TikTok, where we are setting the narrative for this election and putting our priorities top of the agenda. I want to talk to you, Ellie, just a little bit. You're on this stage as a Gen Z candidate, which is so exciting. But we heard, actually give it up. Precisely. It takes a lot to decide to run for office. I want to know what you did before you decided to run. Give us a little story time, and then let us know what was the moment you decided to go for it.
So I'm a professional dancer by trade. I have a BFA in dance from Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater and Fordham University. And so I lived in New York, and I lived paycheck to paycheck. I hustled. I was a professional personal assistant. I was a bartender. I was a caterer. And then I would go to auditions and just try to make ends meet and make sure that I could put food on my table and live my best life in New York. And so when COVID happened and I was catapulted back to my home state of Maine, I took that back up. I remained in the restaurant business and, again, hustled. I worked in 3 restaurants this time, a little bit less, but still working 60 hours a week. And I realized that people who live that lifestyle need a voice in politics, because I felt alone and I didn't feel that I was heard in my places of work. And so what I decided to do was to get into politics and have my voice heard. And it wasn't until I did emerge when I was told that, why are you just in politics? You should be running for office. And so it took a while, but it became very clear to me that, if not who, me. And if not when, it's like you just got to do it. You just got to run. And so here I am, just starting my journey early, and I look forward to becoming U.S. Senator someday.
And declare that. It really resonates with me hearing you talk about living paycheck to paycheck, because when we talk about youth issues, I feel like folks often leave out young people in the conversation around the economy, right? They don't see it as something that is top of mind for young voters, but people are thinking about making rent and affording groceries and moving out of their parents' homes and affording their student loans, right? And those are absolutely youth issues. So thank you for highlighting that through your personal story, your journey to your candidacy. I want to hear more about the campaign trail. What's it like out there? If anyone's thinking about hopping in, what's the best part? What's the hardest part?
I think the hardest and the best part are actually the same. And for me, I'm running for local office, so that means doors, doors, doors. That was the mantra every single Emerge training that I took. And so it's hard. It's hard getting out there and putting yourself on the line and knocking on a stranger's door in the middle of the day without any notice and saying, "Hi, I'm Ellie. I just want to chat. I want to introduce myself. What matters to you in this election cycle?" But from those scary moments, come incredible conversations and meeting people in our community and getting more and more connected with on the ground what's happening in day-to-day lives, because all of our stories matter and all of our experiences matter. And as a representative, my main priority is listening to my community and representing their interests in Augusta. It's a public service. It is a responsibility, it's a duty. And so I think on the campaign trail, it is about winning an election, it is about that, but I'm really focusing on that listening portion and preparing to be a representative and an effective legislator for my community in Augusta.
I want to play a little game with you all, a little this or that question. Annika, I'll start with you first because you brought up door knocking. Would you rather knock 100 doors in 100-degree weather, very Arizona coded, or make 1,000 phone calls, phone bank, only the last person answers? Which one are you taking on?
I think I'm hitting the doors. I'm from South Carolina, so I'm used to that heat. And, sometimes when you knock on a door, you get a really great response, and it just changes the entire landscape of the day. So I'll go with doors.
Ellie, doors or phones?
I'll also say doors, and I'll say that because I knock doors in the rain. So in Maine, we get harsh weather. I was knocking doors in February this year. I was knocking doors in the snow, and so people respect that. That resonates with people. You're out here. You're taking on hard weather to just talk to me. It works.
Yeah, it's so true, right? They see that effort, and it's that opportunity to really give them that FaceTime with you. Annika, I want to chat a little bit more with you. You're 17, and you're here as a delegate, which is major. What are the issues that are top of mind for you as you come into this convention?
Yeah, well, first of all, I just want to say I am incredibly fired up to be here with Emerge and all of you. I think the reason why I'm here, the reason why I chose to run for chair of the high school Dems and to be a delegate at this convention is because I know that there's issues that are at stake for young people that can't wait. And it's issues like reproductive justice, because in my home state, and many other southern states, we're seeing abortion bans being passed that are affecting folks like me and my community, and people who can't access life-saving health care because of gerrymandering and because of Republican supermajorities. And so abortion and reproductive rights are top of mind. I think also for young voters who have grown up in a generation where we are afraid to go out in public because of gun violence and the threat that it poses no matter where we are, where we are afraid about the future of our world because of a climate crisis that has not been accurately addressed by our current legislators, where we are afraid of a future where we will not have economic prosperity or housing justice, where we will not have an opportunity to grow and thrive as generations before us have. We are afraid, and I think that it's far past time that we turn that fear into hope, and we turn all of that fear into something that we can use to make change and get involved. And so that's why I ran, that's why I'm here as a delegate, and hopefully that's why so many other young people and young women like me are getting involved in doing so too.
Yeah, that really resonates with me, and I think lots of other folks who are coming in from banned states, right? I live in Arizona, my home state, where we recently had the threat of an 1864 abortion ban, a near total ban dating all the way back to before Arizona was even a state, at a time where women could not vote or own property. And so for folks like us who are coming from South Carolina, Arizona, right, the stakes are high and they are real, and young people, particularly young women, know what's on the line this election. Can we zoom in a little bit? South Carolina has a 6-week abortion ban. What does that mean for you, your friends, and your peers specifically? What would your message be to the legislators and state folks who put that ban in place?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, I still remember the day in 2022 when I heard the Dobbs case decided. And I remember reading it in utter shock and disbelief. And then I remember finding my mom and I started crying, and I couldn't control it. And it's because I knew what was coming. In my state and in states like mine, where the voices of women are superseded by folks who have had power for far too long and who don't accurately represent our communities. And it did come, right? We've seen so many states enact these outdated abortion bans or enact other restrictions on reproductive health care, life-saving health care for so many folks. It's scary, it's dangerous, and it is one of the most existential threats that I think a lot of women and a lot of people across the country are facing at this time. But the reason why I was truly scared is because I know that not just me, but peers like me who don't have the ability to travel across state lines to access this healthcare, who don't have the mobility because maybe they're working multiple jobs, maybe they're already caring for children, maybe they have other circumstances where they don't have the ability to seek that healthcare in another state, those are the folks who are suffering the most. And it's those marginalized communities that are not having their voices heard right now. And so I believe it's so critical that we are not only electing women everywhere we can and electing folks who are going to raise our stories and fight back against these bans, but that we're also championing, on the national level, our hopefully future president, Kamala Harris, who's going to make sure that we're making abortion legal everywhere so that states like mine don't have the power to strip us of our freedom and our right to exist and have life-saving healthcare.
Great point. Before we move to our conversation around the youth vote, Ellie, is there anything you want to add on reproductive rights coming from Maine? Any perspective you want to add there?
Yeah, Maine is a very different situation because in the last legislature we had a Democratic trifecta. And so we were able to pass a bill that would basically ensure that a person's decision to have an abortion solely resides in the patient and their doctor. And so that is a reality for all Mainers. And then in this recent legislature, we also passed a shield law called LD 227 to make sure that healthcare providers are protected across state lines when providing abortion access and other healthcare and gender-affirming care. And so our fight in Maine is really about ensuring that we are safeguarding the progress that we've made and that we're not going back in Maine. And I think that it's always going to be on the ballot. Abortion will always be on the ballot, regardless of what we've done, where we are. It's always important that we are continuing to do the work, continuing to get out the vote, and continuing to have those tough conversations in the legislature, because all it takes is a couple moments of sitting back and relaxing, and those rights will go away. And so I'm committed to ensuring that Maine remains to be leading the nation in terms of abortion access and gender-affirming care.
And that means so much for people all across the country who are seeking care. And I think this issue in particular highlights the ways that all of our fights are interconnected, right? At a state level, that Arizona's local elections matter to folks nearby, Maine's local elections matter. And I want to highlight some research that recently found that of the 41 million Gen Z voters, many feel fatalistic, right? They're feeling maybe disappointed or detached from government. And they see it as broken, fundamentally. Is this something that resonates with you? How do you respond to it? And are you hearing it? And what would you say to folks who are maybe feeling that way? Either of you can take it.
Sure. Well, I'll start by saying, when I am sitting in my government class in high school and we're learning about how these systems should work, we're learning about an ideal world, right? And then we turn on the news right after and we hear about how, freedoms are being stripped away, we're losing our rights, our government is quote-unquote ineffective in a lot of ways, and it feels like we're looking at two different worlds, right? Like what should be and what is. But I feel like I hear from my peers a lot of times that they're upset and they're fearful, but they don't know what they can do about it. And I think it's far past time that Gen Z voters in particular, we realize that our power is in our collective, and that if we are afraid of something, if we are tired of something, if we are fed up with something, it's time we do something about it. And that's why I'm so excited to see so many Gen Z folks who are running for office, so many Gen Z folks who are working on campaigns, so many Gen Z folks who are just encouraging their friends and their peers and their neighbors to get out and vote, because that is what is making the difference. And it is depressing sometimes to turn on the news or to hear about, what is happening in our government, but I've realized that nothing is going to change unless we are that change and we become that change. And I'm so encouraged by how many Gen Z folks have taken up that calling and who are becoming that change.
Yeah, great point. We heard chants last night at the DNC of do something, right, during Barack Obama's speech. And I'm hearing a lot of that in your response too. Ellie, what do you think? What is your message to young folks who maybe are feeling a little bit lost or a little bit let down by government these days?
I think the first thing I want to say is that it's valid. And I mean, I was there in 2022 when Dobbs was handed down. It was demoralizing. It's tough
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, my mom was born in 1955, so she was born before Roe. It was her generation that got Roe, and then seeing that stripped away from her daughter, it was really tough. It is tough for our generation to be experiencing that. But what I will say to that is that the day that Roe got handed down, there was a huge Planned Parenthood rally in Portland, in the main city in Maine. And hundreds of people in Maine came out. You know, I left my job. We all marched the streets in the middle of the day. And our governor stood up on the stage and spoke. Young people stood up on the stage and spoke. Council people, business people. I mean, it was incredible to see how much power and how much excitement was brought around that, of channeling that frustration and that demoralization into motivation, into hope, into making change. And I mean, seconding what Annika said about collectivism, about working together, about being unified and being in solidarity and working together. And so when I think about young folks and like being a young person, I was blessed to understand how government works when I was in school. And I don't know how many students have that luxury of understanding what is local government versus state government. How do we vote? What are term limits? How are people elected in your state? How many representatives do you have? Who is your state representative? Who is your state senator? That kind of information. And I think that the more that we work on outreach and more on, bringing in people and saying your voice matters, how can I help you get more involved? How can I help you have your voice be heard in these ways in the political circles at the State House?
That's amazing. A real organizer perspective, right? Meeting people where they're at, building up their storytelling potential. And I think that, we are in an election cycle. We are all thinking about the ballot box and winning this election, but we also have to think about making a sustainable movement, right? How do we build up the young people around us so that way they can continue to do this work in a way that propels us forward on the issues. And I love that intergenerational perspective that you bring in with your mom too, right? That's so important. We learn so much from the women around us, whether they be the organizers who taught us how to organize, right? Or our moms before us. And I think that's a really, really important perspective we should all be holding in this election cycle and beyond. I want to talk more about the youth vote. Which is one of the things that I'm working on in my home state of Arizona this year. Let's get into it. What do you think Kamala Harris and Tim Walz need to do or keep doing in order to capture more of those 41 million Gen Z votes this fall? This could be something on the issues. This could be something strategy-wise. What is that thing that they need to be doing to get Gen Z out this election cycle?
I think in Maine, I'll speak for Maine.
Please do.
That I've heard the campaign talk so much about the issues and centering issues that truly matter to young people, that young people are most worried about. In Maine right now, we have a housing crisis. There are so many young people who are unable to afford housing or unable to afford rent. And I mean, I am proudly living with my parents at 27 years old because I cannot afford to buy a house. I can't afford to pay rent. And I know that I am not alone in that. There are many Mainers who are in my generation who are still living with their parents because of the reality of the housing crisis. And that's true nationwide. And we've heard from Kamala Harris and Tim Walz about their priorities on housing and making sure that housing is affordable and that there's equitable access to housing. And that's just one example. Climate change is another huge issue that they talk a lot about, that they are centering in their campaign, that is also critical to young people. I mean, like I said, I'm 27. I would like to live until I'm 100 years old. Let's hope so. I want to make sure that the planet I'm living in when I'm 100 years old is still safe, is still protected, is still livable. And so when we're fighting for our future as young people, I want to hear about the issues. You want to hear about what they're going to do on day one to make sure that they're prioritizing the issues that are central to young people.
I couldn't agree more. And I think we all know, right, when we look at the choices, that there's clearly one candidate who's moving us forward and there's one candidate who's moving us backwards. That's clear. But to a lot of voters, they're still uncertain, right? And I'm coming from a red state. I'm coming from a state where I have a lot of friends from across the aisle who still haven't decided who they're voting for. They're still unsure about how to make this decision. And for many of them, it's their first time voting. It feels scary to make that choice when it feels like, so many folks are saying this is the election of our lifetimes. And they're like, well, this is my first election. So that's a lot of pressure to put on me as a young person, right? So when we're talking about what the campaign needs to do, I think first they need to continue to hold true to what their vision and their values have been, because we know those are values that are delivering for young people. Those are progressive values that are centering climate justice, housing justice, reproductive justice, that are centering building a future that is going to be better for us, building a future where we can pass down to the next generation of leaders that we can be proud of. And so I think, making sure that is a priority is obviously number one. But in terms of messaging, I think a lot of that burden also falls on each and every single one of us, on young people to get involved with, Students for Harris on their high school or college campuses, or even just to do outreach to their friends and family, because again, from a red and rural state, I think a lot of folks don't realize the wins that they are seeing and the results they are seeing delivered in their communities from the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, or from the Inflation Reduction Act, or from the CHIPS and Science Act, or from all of these, landmark pieces of legislation that Kamala Harris has helped champion and that she and Tim Walz will continue to push forward in the next 4 years. Those are all things that we need to be talking about with our communities, because we're all excited. We're all mobilized. We know what we got to do. We've got to get every single other person on board, especially the young people who might be a little scared right now about what's at stake.
Great point. It is that peer-to-peer, that conversational piece, right? Nobody has the exact same personal network you do. You have unique access to your friends, your partner, your neighbors, your classmates, your parents, right? And the people who care about you are going to care about what you care about. So if you take one call to action away, maybe it's to have a big conversation with someone in your life, or small conversations leading up to November. We have something like, 11 weeks? 11 weeks to get this done, to do it and do it right. As we were chatting about what we want to see, something that I'm thinking about that's top of mind for me. As a Kamala Harris alum, I worked doing influencer and surrogate strategy for her when I was 19 on her first presidential run. And something I've really admired about their campaign is the way that they've used social media, right? The way that they have mobilized on @KamalaHarrisHQ in a rapid response account that makes fun memes that are responsive to what young people are saying online, right? To the trends that young people are starting and leading, but also to the priorities and the messages that are top of mind for young people. And I think it signals something larger to that youth audience online, which is to say that the campaign is listening. They are paying attention to what you are saying online and in real life, and that there are young people in the room. These memes are getting made by people just like you. And so when I think about what our candidate, Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, right, need to do to win, I think it's to carry that responsiveness to young people on, and to double down on that promise and say that there will be young people in the room come a Harris administration. We're coming to our final question now, and I want to chat about the future. A big theme of this DNC, this convention, right, is the future, our future. I have been known to self-describe as a future POTUS, have been since I was like Annika's age, like 16, 17. I want to chat with you all about what your future job is, dream job even, we could say, if you dream of labor, and how we can all help you get there. What is that? And maybe it's not even a job. Maybe for me, for example, there's nothing I'd rather be than a good role model. And I think that's been a through line in my career as I've been a digital strategist and a content creator. So I want to reflect on that with you all. What's ahead professionally, and how do we help you get there?
Well, first, what's ahead is college for me. I'm moving in next week, so if you want to support me there, I don't know what you can do other than give me some prayers and luck. But Yeah, I'm very excited for this next chapter. I think what's really important to me is that we are supporting the students of America across, classrooms and across college campuses so that they have the power to do that organizing work that we talked about. You can go to hsdems.org to get plugged in with the high school Dems. If you have a student in your life who is in high school, who isn't yet involved in organizing and isn't yet involved in this movement, they can be and they should be, because like Deja said, our voices matter, and the campaign is listening. And folks in power are listening to what young people have to say, so it's important that those folks get involved. But looking at the future ahead of that, I've always been called to speak up for my community. I feel a really deep connection to the South, where I'm from, because I think a lot of folks count us out when we're talking about building power, especially in the Democratic Party, and I think that that's the wrong take, because there's so many powerful folks in the South who are leading the change and who are making sure that, especially marginalized communities are heard and listened to, and so I would hope maybe one day to be able to serve those people and to be able to represent them well. But for right now, just focused on maybe getting my books up and studying a little bit more, and hopefully delivering some wins this November.
I love that. And as a recent grad, I hope you enjoy your time there. Really enjoy it. Soak it up. Have fun. And Ellie, what about you? What's ahead, and how do we help you get there?
That's a huge question, which I love,
Giant.
by the way. I think for me personally, long term, is I just want to make sure I'm continuing to give back to my community. And that can come in many different forms. And I think that as someone who's a former bartender who is prioritizing listening and collaboration, I want to continue to use those skills for good and to make sure that I'm giving back to my community in many different ways. I think for Maine on the larger scale, I think my Governor Mills said it earlier today, or maybe I shouldn't be saying that, but we live in a state that is known to be, let's say, pretty white. And so I'm getting a nod from Jill Barkley Roy in the back there. It's true. It's a fact. But the reality is that I grew up there. I was born there, and our Maine delegation is probably the most diverse delegation that Maine's had in our history. And over a third of our delegation are actually from the LGBTQ+ community, including myself.
Amazing. Applause for that.
Yeah. And so when we're thinking about the future of Maine, I think it's ensuring that we have better visibility, ensuring that the marginalized communities in Maine are heard. That includes tribal sovereignty, that includes the Native communities and the 5 recognized tribes that are in Maine. And we have a lot of progress to go. We have a lot of work to do in Maine. And I think that working on those issues and ensuring that those voices are heard, as someone who is hoping to be the first East Asian and Japanese Mainer to be elected to the Maine State Senate, or actually the Maine House in general, to make sure that I'm not the last. I don't want to be alone in that. I want to make sure that when I look around at our caucus of people of color, that there are a lot of us. There are 151 members in the House right now, and about less than a single-digit number of those members are from marginalized communities who are people of color. And that needs to change, because there are marginalized communities in Maine. We exist, we are here, and we are diverse, and I want to make sure that we have a voice and make sure we can affect change.
Amazing. Something you said very much resonates with what I know to be true about Kamala Harris, which is that her mother told her and raised her to know that she may be the first to do many things, but she should never be the last. And I think that is a theme here at this convention, a theme for the next 4 years and beyond. And I want to thank you both for your time, for the work that you do, and for sharing your expertise with us today. Thanks.